Hello, everyone, and welcome to another Bible Study Live. We have Mac again with us and Peter. Before we get started, I always dig straight in without manners. I should have more manners. So let's introduce ourselves. Peter, would you mind starting us off with introducing ourselves a little bit?
Sure. I'm Peter. I use they, them pronouns. I am the Development and Communications Coordinator at TMC.
How about you, Mac?
I'm Mac, he, him, and I am a member of the TMC community and I've been joining the Bible study for a few months now. So it's a lot of fun.
Yeah. I think Peter and Mac have been the consistent factor because Mike and Melody and I have not been available. But yes, thank you both so much for being here. My name is Mish. I use she, her pronouns. I am the director of operations, and together with Mike and Melody, we are the executive directors of TMC. And today we have a special treat for y'all because we're talking not just about John 9. Mac happens to be, small flex, a PhD student specifically specializing in John. Is John 9 your specific specialty or the entire book of John, Mac?
Well, I'm talking about recognition scenes in the book of John, so I picked a couple, and John 9 is one of those, in addition to the story of doubting Thomas in John 20, and then Jesus' trial before Pilate in John 18 and 19. And I almost did that one, but I haven't written that chapter yet, so I was like, we don't need to do that.
Listen. Wow, that sounds super interesting. I feel like Peter, shouldn't we have like a Q&A just with Mac? I just put you on the spot here, Mac. One day I'm going to get you an invite. Ask Mac everything, all your John related questions, and he will know all the answers. That's how it works.
Yes, that's what I was promised about the PhD, is you'll just have all the
answers. So good.
All the answers and a guaranteed professorship.
That's right.
That
right.
is
at least, yeah.
Academia.
That's what I was told.
Such a healthy job market. I have heard that.
Yeah.
Very healthy. Very healthy. And then at some point you get tenure and you can never get fired because stuff and things. Makes a lot of sense. Makes a lot of sense. Yes.
Hi. We've already devolved so quickly.
Yes. Hi, Amory. Hi, Eden, and everybody else that is watching. So if you've never seen Bible Study Live before, or if you're watching this not live, but on a different day, we go through a passage. All three of us come from different backgrounds, and we kind of like talk about whatever comes up in us. So yes, we have studied the text before in the previous couple of days, but we are all coming at this from a we want to learn kind of perspective, unless your name is Mac, then you're like the master. But besides Peter and I, us fellow students, right? we just try to figure it out as we go. So it is great if you can interact with us. That's what the chat is for. So if you have any questions or observations or things that you want to vent about, because I definitely vent a lot about texts in scripture, you are welcome to do so. Hi, Leo. And let's get going. So we have a little bit of background info. John 9, you wrote a little bit about this, right, Peter? Do you want to kick us off?
Yeah, we actually talked about this passage. I think it was at some point last year as well. And I like the fact that we're revisiting it, and that I think Mac will have some like new insights and frameworks to share. But one thing that we did talk quite a bit about last time we discussed this passage was the importance of highlighting the work of disabled theologians when you're talking about a healing story, especially. Often these healing stories get weaponized against disabled folks. There's, like in a lot of church spaces, there's this implication that, disability would need to be taken away for people to be, seen as fully healed, seen as whole, in the eyes of God and the church. So it's just, I think, really important to set as context whenever we're talking about a story of healing like this, the work of some disabled theologians. So I pulled a quote from Amy Kenny in her book, My Body is Not a Prayer Request, and thought I would just read it to kind of set that context before we move into the passage. So Amy Kenny says, these healing stories to assume that my disability needs to be erased in order for me to live an abundant life is disturbing, not only because of what it says about me, but also because of what it reveals about people's notions of God. I bear the image of the Alpha and the Omega. My disabled body is a temple for the Holy Spirit. I have the mind of Christ. There's no caveat to those promises. To suggest that I am anything less than sanctified and redeemed is to suppress the image of God in my disabled body and to limit how God is already at work through my life. Maybe we need to be freed not from disability, but from the notion that it limits my ability to showcase God's radiance to the church. What we need to be freed from is ableism.
Very good.
Yeah.
That's pretty epic. I saw Amy Kenny speak at Evolving Faith last year. It's where I met Austin Hartke for the first time, by the way, in person. But she constantly came at us, and I was there with another person of color, and we were like, "Wow, is this white woman teaching us more than all the other speakers at the same time?" And we felt it in our bodies, because I think she said something similar to what you just said. My disabled body is a temple for the Holy Spirit. Oh, It's so beautiful. I love it. Thanks for sharing that, Peter. So, Mac, what is the context of the story a little bit? How do we get to here?
Yeah, I think that so this comes right after a big discourse where Jesus does one of his I am statements, and this time it's I am the light of the world. And I think that that's really relevant to this passage, because this is sort of Jesus's object lesson of like, I told you I'm the light of the world, and here I am giving sight to someone. And it kind of sets up the story as being, in my view at least, or in the view of other folks, as being about Jesus's identity and Jesus sort of showcasing that, which I think comes up pretty clearly later on. And the other thing is that this takes place after the Feast of the Tabernacles. So this is all leading up to Jesus has been teaching very publicly. Everyone has seen him doing a lot of stuff. And then he does this, and then he does a miracle and then nopes out of the story, which we'll see in a minute.
All right. Yeah, we cut it kind of like in, what is it? Three passages. So let's see how far we get and start reading verses 1 through 12 first. Who wants to go ahead and read it, or should I start reading it?
Go ahead.
Yeah.
Okay, I do the controversial thing, as I have done before, simply because this is the Bible I have in front of me. It's an ESV. Let's let that sink in. Chapter 9. As he passed by, he saw a man blind from birth, and his disciples asked him, "Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind?" Jesus answered, it was not that this man sinned or his parents, but that the work of God might be displayed in him. We must work the works of him who sent me while it is day. Night is coming when no one can work. As long as I am in the world, I am the light of the world. Having said these things, he spit on the ground and made mud with the saliva. Then he anointed the man's eyes with the mud and said to him, "Go wash in the pools of Siloam," which means sent. And so he went and washed and came back seeing. The neighbors and those who had seen him before as a beggar were saying, "Is this not the man who used to sit and beg?" Some said, "It is he." Others said, "No, but he's like him. He kept saying, I am the man. So they said to him, then how were your eyes opened? He answered, the man called Jesus made mud and and anointed my eyes and said to me, go to Siloam and wash. So I went and washed and received my sight. They said to him, where is he? He said, I don't know. Sorry. It's such
Really
a com-
that last part, don't you, mean?
I just find it so everybody is confused. Is this the guy?
Said, Jesus just nopes out of the story, and everyone's like, "What happened?"
Yep. She's just like, this won't cause any problems at all, and then just leaves. She's like, it's fine.
It's fine.
So what could go wrong?
I'm just gonna.
I do think Jesus sometimes seems to enjoy being kind of an agent of chaos, just kind of like
entirely. I don't think there's any question about that at all. I think he really, really enjoys it. He's like, the more confused they can be, the better. In fact, why am I doing this? To confuse you.
Yeah,
I think that checks out.
Okay, that answers that question. Ooh.
All right.
I do think it's good to find, like, I think some of this is actually written to be funny, and that because it sounds like heightened language to us, we don't often, like, sometimes we don't pick up on it, or because we're so used to hearing the story over and over again. Like, some of this is funny.
Yeah. I like the idea of everyone being like, looks just like him, except for like, there's no way, because like he was blind, so obviously it's not him, and he's like, hello,
can't be him.
Yes, it's me. I imagine him like pulling out an ID and being like,
yeah, exactly.
What more do you want? Like, I'm in the same place. Like, I'm like, what?
Yeah, exactly. Like, that looks like me, but it's a woman that I see right now. No. It's literally me here. Here's my old passport. I'm still me. Then how are you a woman now? The man called Jesus healed me.
See, I've never even pulled that one out. So well done. There you go. There you go.
Micah Melody would be proud of me, right, Peter? Querying the Bible.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I put some questions down there besides the comicality of it, but let's quickly. Verse 6 is definitely one of my favorites. Jesus is weird verses. Like, he spits on the floor, makes mud, and anoints. They say anoint. So I was wondering, Mac, if you have any insight on, because in my like Jewish background, anointing typically is something that you do like for kings, and they typically use messianic language. I looked at the Greek quickly, and it looks like it's the same root as Messiah or Christos. So what is the significance, do you think, behind that?
Unfortunately, I think it's a lot more boring than it sounds like it would be. I think that there's the two kinds of anointing. There's the anointing in sort of like the kingship royalty model, and then there's the anointing in like the medical sense. And I think this is just that, but it happens to be the same word as anointed one, either as Messiah or as Christ. So unfortunately, I think it's more of a boring answer. But the spit thing is kind of fun, because it's one of those situations where if you don't know a lot about other ancient healing and miracle, then you're like, oh, Jesus is like so special and unique. And then everyone else goes, lots of people did that, actually. Spit has magical powers quite regularly, actually, which is just kind of fun. That just like, Jesus is the only one that does it in the Bible, but lots of ancient miracles involve saliva. It just has magical properties, which I just think is fun.
Now we know.
Yeah. Now we know. Whenever I sneeze on someone accidentally,
be like, you are especially blessed now.
Yeah. Especially blessed. Max
potentially
says,
healed.
Yes. Go to the river and wash it off. And
well, yeah, you still do have to go wash off the spit. Jesus is not saying like keep it. Like, that's not. You still have to go wash it off.
Okay,
Still
okay, okay,
ending
okay.
at the end. It's not in the middle, but at the end, still go wash.
Yeah, yeah. All right,
Yeah.
like Eden says, I like the word anoint, but in the NRSV it just says put on. I think they bypassed my entire question there.
Exactly. I think they're trying to avoid that sort of like confusion of like anoint feels also, especially because like Jesus gets anointed later. They're I think like they're trying to lower it a little bit, which I mean, I don't think we necessarily need to do that. If you want to go with that, then how about the Son of God anointing a random person that he found on the street?
Mhm.
Yeah.
I'm still on board with that.
Yep.
Yeah. And he was, for the record, he was still blind when he went to the river, right? So
Yeah.
when Jesus, this is another one of those moments, like Jesus go to the river. But I mean,
But I don't know how we got there.
I hope he knew the way, you know. It's a little insensitive.
It's also like it makes sense why later on they're like, well, where did Jesus go? And he's like, I don't know. It's like, yeah, because he still hasn't seen him ever.
Right. He has
He doesn't-
everything.
He hasn't gotten to say anything to Jesus. Jesus hasn't really said much to him other than just like, go wash my spit off your face. And he hasn't even seen him yet. And so they're like,
So we
well, where
only
is he?
heard. Oh,
Yeah.
I missed
Yeah,
that.
he's
one.
only heard Jesus and like felt him and obviously received a miracle, but he hasn't seen Jesus yet. So how's he supposed to know?
Yeah.
Which is why like the first identification he can give of him is just like a man called Jesus. That's all I got. I don't.
Yeah, it's this dude called Jesus. Yeah, I heard him
spat,
spit.
and now I can see.
I felt something put on my eyes, so I assume it was. Wow. Yes. Yeah. Wait. What did What is his name again? Was it Ananias and Paul? Was that also spit? No. Wait. What? In Acts, when Paul is
I think
called by God.
I'm going to check that actually because I'm not. Because I know his eyes got anointed with something, but I don't know if it was just said like mud or if it involved spit first. Let's see.
Now I'm intrigued.
9:17.
We're down quite a spit rabbit hole right now.
Listen.
We have to know.
This is what happens when we get multiple Bible nerds together in one place.
Yes. Eden, when you come. Oh, boring. I'm sorry, Eden. Not more spit and mud. Yes.
What a shame.
Yeah.
Yeah, no. So last year, you said, Peter, you specifically focused on. I mean, I'm looking at your notes here. What were you trying to say? Jesus inverts their ideas of blindness. Oh, that's inverted.
Yeah, I think it was another one of Amy Kenny's thoughts about this story specifically. But I saw too that in your notes you said, you know, that phrase that the works of God might be displayed in him. You know, how there's, you know, almost this implication like this person's blindness existed so that, you know, like God could show his glory by healing him or something, which, you know, sounds pretty troubling.
I have a reframe that might help us.
Yeah, I think Amy Kenny does too, which is basically like the sort of the disability itself becomes this place of encounter with the glory of God. It's not like the removal of the disability, it's the disability itself that.
Oh, damn.
Yeah.
I see.
So disability helps reveal the light of the world, no longer a symbol of sin, but one of being open to revelation.
Mm-hmm.
And that's sort of what Jesus is recognizing in this person.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking as well of like, because Jesus doesn't say that like my healing of this person is to reveal the works of God. It's just like, what is, I want to look at the actual verse. He was born blind so that God's works might be revealed in him. Something about his whole identity, which includes his blindness,
right,
reveals God in the world.
Yep.
Yeah. That sounds definitely like a difference way of looking at it, because that narrative of healing and sin is definitely something that has been haunting me for a long time. Like, it happens more often, right? There's more passages where Jesus is like, hey, don't sin anymore.
John 5.
There, see, we got the
Yeah.
John scholar, so it's like right there,
I put-
right there.
I literally copied and pasted one of my footnotes from the chapter because I was like, yeah. Because in the healing narrative in John 5, Jesus specifically warns, see, you've been made well. Do not sin anymore so that nothing worse happens to you. And this was someone who was healed of paralysis.
Oof.
Literally gets told, like, hey, cut it out or something worse is coming. So it's not a crazy question that the disciples even ask this, because like it wasn't, they were also coming out of, I'm sure Misha might be familiar with the word physiognomy. The idea that the way your body looks and the way your body works is directly correlated to your character or your soul or you as a person. So if you looked stereotypically ugly, you have an ugly soul as well. If you have a disability, if you have an illness, those directly correlate to something wrong with you internally as well. And so this like correlation between disability and sin really comes out of that consciousness of like, this is obviously like an indication of something else, something deeper going on, which is why the disciples would ask something like that to begin with. And why Jesus actually saying in this particular instance, no, would be a little like, okay, that's a little different.
Yeah.
Because there would sort of be this like default, like obviously something bad happened either from your parents or you.
Yeah. Would you say that
we think of that as being, something like specific to that cultural context, but it really is something that is still pretty prevalent now. I mean, I think that that's still, a sort of strain of thought that kind of runs through the church and like the Christian community that we have to be kind of aware of and fighting against.
Yeah. And I think something in this passage as a whole that sort of has always bugged me with a lot of the readings that I see is like, we'll see later that the irony in the story is so contingent upon like the metaphorical value of blindness as being a bad thing, as being related to ignorance and all of those things. And just trying to preserve that irony, we perpetuate that. So we have to find another way of reading the story that doesn't still hinge on that. Because there are blind people who do not see that as a necessarily detriment to their experience of the world. It changes their experience of the world.
Yeah.
But not every blind person is walking around looking for Jesus to spit on their eyes. So gotta find another way of working with the story.
Yeah.
I'm really curious to hear more, Mac, about your like how you see this passage focusing on like Jesus's revelation of himself or like his identity.
Yeah, it's particularly interesting, this passage, because Jesus is gone, so much of it. But we see the first part up here talking about that first identification of the man when they ask him, how is it that you're able to see? And he says, a man called Jesus. He's not wrong about who Jesus is. Jesus is a man called Jesus, but he's still not getting like the full picture. And we'll see as we continue reading that picture of who Jesus is and his identity gets more accurate and honed in throughout the whole thing. And we sort of watch this formerly blind man. I like that. The person, Amy Kenny, named him Zach.
Yep.
I like that. My wife would name him
Zach.
Whenever we have somebody unnameless, we name them Gordon. So, give the man a name. I like it.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah, I think that's good. But like, it's this progression of him recognizing Jesus. So part of my overall goal in the dissertation is looking at these scenes of recognition where Jesus is demonstrating who he is, and the people he interacts with have to go through this process of actually recognizing him. Because, like we said, to this point, Jesus has spoken to the man, he's touched the man, he's done a miracle. He hasn't seen him yet. And now those aren't enough yet. Those ways of expressing his identity aren't clear enough. We get a man called Jesus, but that's not Jesus's goal. That's not who he wants to be seen as. He's not pathing at the moment for who he wants to be. So
Yes.
that's sort of where I'm heading.
Yeah, no, I like that a lot, and we should continue reading, because then we get to those points, because we can't give spoilers. We don't do that,
Yeah.
right?
No one's ever read this before.
Yeah, exactly. But I also thought about, especially in light of what Eden asks in the comment of like, what do we do with these things? It's like, if Jesus, you said John 5, right, is like basically saying, I healed you, go and sin no more. And of course we can try to make it into something. Oh no, he was riding a one-wheeler and he was reckless, and that's why he's paralyzed. And Jesus says, don't do that again. Of course we could do that, but that is taking a lot of liberty. Could it also be that Jesus was just a little bit more curmudgeon-y in chapter 5, and in chapter 9 maybe he changed and was like, you know what, that was too harsh for me. I'm misinterpreting what disability even mean, and that this is a sign that Jesus grew. Because if we believe in the doctrine of the humanity of Christ, Jesus can't cheat, right? He can't say, God powers on, and I have uber discernment, and I have zero bias. If we believe in a doctrine of the humanity of Christ, then Jesus had bias, and maybe that's part of the point here. He was biased in chapter 5, still healed, and he was less biased in chapter 9. A little bit weird, but not as biased as in chapter 5. So,
and Jesus was, a product of his environment as well. He was a dude in the first century when these correlations were going to be drawn. And they wouldn't be applied consistently for anybody. Everybody would, just like we do today, I believe something, but unless it's inconvenient for me in that particular circumstance, in which case I'll just blur it a little bit.
Yeah, exactly. Let's pretend
same
it's
thing what
not
you're
there.
saying. Like, if Jesus is human, then Jesus can do the same thing and have the same complicated beliefs that Jesus would then have to interrogate, like he does in the story of the Syrophoenician woman, not this gospel, but same situation where Jesus has to sort of like, oh, I'm coming at this with a lens that makes sense for me to have, but I still need to think about it.
Yes.
Yeah, I was thinking about that passage too. I just recently heard that used as an example of the same thing, of like, Jesus also had to learn things sometimes and, come to understand things more deeply, often through like encounters with people, and being open to like learning in community specifically.
Yeah. I mean, I like that passage so much because of that. Because you can totally see, like, I'm not feeding dogs. It's that passage, right? That you're,
Yeah.
It's essentially he's telling her, you're a dog, and you're not worthy of this, and then a whole conversation is like, maybe you're right, and I'm a little bit harsh here. But we've historically idolized the words of Jesus and saying, no, what he says must be a lesson. But what if it's not a lesson? What if the lesson is that exactly Jesus is human and he is growing there? Who wants to do verses 13 to 34?
I can.
Boom.
All right, I am reading out of the Common English Bible. 13 through 34, is that what you said?
Yes, 13 to 34.
Okay. Then they led the man who had been born blind to the Pharisees. Now Jesus made the mud and smeared it on the man's eyes on a Sabbath day. So Pharisees also asked him how he was able to see. The man told them, "He put mud on my eyes, I washed, and now I see." Some Pharisees said, "This man isn't from God because he breaks the Sabbath law." Others said, "How can a sinner do miraculous signs like these?" So they were divided. Some of the Pharisees questioned the man who had been born blind again. "What do you have to say about him since he healed your eyes?" He replied, "He's a prophet." The Jewish leaders didn't believe the man had been blind and received his sight until they called for his parents. The Jewish leaders asked them, "Is this your son? Are you saying he was born blind? How can he see now?" His parents answered, "We know he is our son. We know he was born blind. But we don't know how he now sees, and we don't know who healed his eyes. Ask him. He's old enough to speak for himself." His parents said this because they feared the Jewish authorities. This is because the Jewish authorities had already decided that whoever confessed Jesus to be the Christ would be expelled from the synagogue. That's why his parents said, "He's old enough. Ask him." Therefore they called a second time for the man who had been born blind and said to him, "Give glory to God. We know this man is a sinner." The man answered, "I don't know whether he's a sinner. Here's what I do know. I was blind, and now I see." They questioned him, "What did he do to you? How did he heal your eyes?" He replied, "I already told you, and you didn't listen. Why do you want to hear it again? Do you want to become his disciples too?" They insulted him. "You're his disciples, but we are Moses' disciples. We know that God spoke to Moses, but we don't know where this man is from." The man answered, "This is incredible. You don't know where he is from, yet he healed my eyes. We know that God doesn't listen to sinners. God listens to anyone who is devout and does God's will. No one has ever heard of a healing of the eyes of someone born blind. If this man wasn't from God, he couldn't do this." They responded, "You were born completely in sin. How is it that you dare to teach us?" Then they expelled him.
This part is very funny to me.
It is.
It's very good.
Yeah, he's clearly like making
He's
fun.
over it.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, he's over it. He's like, "What?
Yeah.
You're gonna follow him too? Like what?"
Yeah.
It's basically the Bible equivalent of "Did I stutter?"
Yeah, right.
Right. And his parents, he's old enough.
Yeah.
Go ask him
His
yourself.
Don't want to get involved.
No, they're like, we're
Yeah.
not. This is his thing. He's
Yeah.
a grown up.
Yeah.
Yes. But
I
it's
don't know
that
what nonsense he got into, but it's not our responsibility.
Yeah. Exactly. It feels like this. You have that passage with the Pharisees, which is the discussion, and then in verse 18, it seems to like continue the hilarious comedic narrative of before. And yeah, this is a highly enjoyable passage to read if you just take a meta perspective and like, what in the world is happening here?
It's one of those like fly on the wall moments. So just like I just want to listen to them.
Yeah.
Yeah, because everybody is so confused, and it's like it could be so simple.
Except one person, but they won't listen to him.
Exactly. If you would just listen, and in intersectional theology, right, we constantly say we have to center marginalized voices, listen to those marginalized voices, and here comes the important part, believe them. And this is such a great example of where they did not center, listen, and believe to a they completely and utterly ignored this person. Like, you have not an eyewitness account, which is kind of like makes it extra hilarious. You have like an ear witness account, I reckon.
Yeah.
And
or but in a very tactile sense and not a seeing
Right.
sense.
Right.
Like his eyes did witness, just not in like a seeing sort of way.
Right. Like I see Amory say, is there some sort of new creation thing going on here? Which
You
is
are
kind of
not
cool,
the
right?
only one that thinks that.
That is so
Mhm.
cool. Yeah. Yeah.
As I affectionately call them, the old dudes, aka Chrysostom, Aquinas, Augustine, those guys. I call them the old dudes in all of my notes. They agree with you that there is some sort of new creation thing going on.
That is awesome. Yeah. Yeah, it is. So I forgot about this chat. I have a lot of, as a Jew, I have a lot of problems with John. So I mean, but it is the first, like, we had to translate in my first Greek classes, we had to translate John chapter 1. That was apparently the easiest to translate. So I still have it imprinted in Greek in my head from all the repetitions that we had to do, but besides that, I haven't looked at it for a long time. And then lately it's been coming back in my life. And now we're doing this Bible study live. So it's been a while since I'm reading this and then looking at this from an intersectional theology lens. It's very interesting to me, where this is like not just let's find marginalized voices and hear what they actually have to say. Here's an example of actually what's happening today in life, where we have people who are experts, lived experience experts, right? And we just don't listen to them. How do we help trans people? So let's get a committee, but no trans people are invited, right?
Yeah.
Ouch.
Yep.
Yeah, it's as old as the blind guy narrative in John 9. Zach, as old as Zach.
Well, and I just admire too that Zach just doesn't waver. He's just like, I know
Yes.
what I experienced. You can't tell me something different than I experienced. This is what happened. And the conclusions, the sort of like things you're trying to extrapolate from it don't make any sense.
And he doesn't waver, and he ups it, because now Jesus is not just a man called Jesus. Now Jesus is a prophet.
Right.
He's stepped
It
it up
just
again.
went up.
He's like, yeah. He's like, I'm understanding more that like this guy's a bigger deal than I initially thought. I'm finding out, and he's starting to like develop that understanding of who Jesus is throughout the story. And now he's a prophet, which is, if we go back to John 4, woman at the well, we're getting close, but prophet wasn't enough for Jesus then, and it's not going to be enough in this story either. But I think but it's really good that like we, even like the more pressure, like you'd think that the man would step back and be like, well, I don't know, he's just some guy, but instead we see what I think is a really good model of allyship, being like, no, I'm still learning, but I'm not taking steps back here, I'm taking a step forward. I still don't fully recognize who Jesus is. I don't fully understand that identity yet, but I know I'm going forward. I'm not going to step back. I'm not going to shut up about it. I think that's a really good model. I do a fun little like historical sources note for the part of saying where it sort of like feels very jumps meta narrative, where they're like, oh, the Jews had already agreed to kick everyone out of the synagogue who confessed Jesus.
Everybody knows this.
Yeah. The common consensus is that was in insertion later, having nothing to do with this particular time, but having to do with the time when this was being written and the Johannine community. Because at that time, there was conflict between the early church, the Johannine, in theory, community of Christians, and the Jewish people at that time were having conflict. And there was like arguing over whether or not early Christians could continue to participate in the synagogue. Not at this time, though. They were just like, I'm bitter about this happening right now, so we're just going to sprinkle it in here. And everybody knows it.
Yeah, that makes sense. When was John written?
Oh, what is the date? It's somewhere in my notes. It's hundreds. I don't remember which hundred, like somewhere in there, but it's in the hundreds.
So much later.
Yeah,
like
very late.
Closer to the Bar Kokhba revolts. Got it. I mean,
Yes.
that puts everything in perspective. No temple for
between 90 and 110.
over 30 years.
It's the latest of the Gospels.
Yep. Got it. Oh, we got
Oh, there you go. Thank you.
Yep.
I like Jamie's comments, by the way.
John knows.
Yeah, good stuff. I like Jamie's comment though. I'm sympathetic for the parents who are being asked about what they don't know. It's like, yeah, it sounds familiar.
They're like, we're
Definitely.
just as confused.
Yeah.
He was blind last time we saw him. I don't know.
Yeah.
I clearly missed something.
Yeah. I don't know. We got all the answers. Mish is now a woman, and this is exactly how it goes. We have all the answers. No.
Parents have never been known to have all of those answers.
This is great. This is like all the trans theology goes straight into this chapter.
It works really well.
Works really well.
Yeah.
Oh, snap.
So
But
Mac, when you're like thinking about like these gradual realizations, that Zach has? Like, what do you see as sort of like leading to them? Is it like he's just open to?
Yeah, I think that he's very open. And for this part, particularly, like this discussion of like, why is it? Because we have got like these two options that I'm just going to be saying the Jews. That's a very loaded term in John, but for the sake of conciseness, unless we want to go into all of that argument. But like the two identities that they're debating is he sent from God or is he a sinner? And those are the two options. And they're like, well, he's not acting like someone who is sent from God. He doesn't fit that. Like you're calling him a prophet. You're saying he's sent from God, but we think we know what that looks like. And it's not this. He doesn't heal people on the Sabbath. Like that can't work. And so from that side, it reminds me a lot of situations where like, well, you're not what I think a man should look like. You're not what I think a woman should look like. I don't have an expectation of what a non-binary person should look like, so you can't be that. Like this idea of there's a right way for you to express that identity, and if you don't match, then there's no way. It can't be true. So Jesus isn't the kind of prophet, the kind of sent from God, the kind of Messiah that they're looking for. And so they're just like, no. Meanwhile, this Zach doesn't have that. And I don't think that it's unrelated to the fact that he still hasn't seen Jesus. Like, he doesn't have those expectations. He's like, I don't know what I'm looking for. So I'm learning based on what I've been given. And what I've been given is this guy says that he's going to do the works of God. Now I can see, and I couldn't do that before. And you all seem very upset. So obviously this is a big deal. And he's putting those pieces together because he's open to putting those pieces together. And he wants to know, and he doesn't want to step back from his story. So I think the fact that he's so rooted in that lived experience that he's had with Jesus, and he doesn't have all of those preconceived notions of the people he's arguing with, has left him much more open to developing that understanding of who Jesus is. And I like the fact that Jesus doesn't even have to do anything about it. Jesus is like, I've offered you this. This is up to you. Like, you need to figure this out. And I think that that's also really good, because the number of times that like we have to lay out all of the pieces and explain all the procedures in order for someone to be like, oh, okay. I guess I will occasionally remember you to gender you correctly.
Yeah.
And instead Jesus is like, I've done what I need to do. I'm going to back it up, and you need to work this out on your own. I really like that.
Mm-hmm. Well, I wonder too, like, I'm thinking about the fact that Zach has also been sort of othered within this context and within this framework of like sinner versus sent from God. And so he has kind of a unique perspective, and is maybe, because he's had that experience, is able to find it easier to question this framework that he's been presented with, and then like be open to another way of understanding.
Yeah. And not just othered. He's legitimately had people say like, oh, this is who you're saying you are, but nah, I actually don't think so. Pretty sure not.
Yep.
Stripped of the identity. Yes.
As he's actively saying, no, it's me. Hello.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But then we like parlay that experience into empathy, and then like a deeper understanding of someone else.
So true. Oof. This is a good one, y'all. Was last year's Peter had a different tone? Are you saying that's last year's chapter 9 discussion?
Oh yeah, I think we're talking about like a completely different set of things, which is just so cool, because it's so rich. You know, you can just return to it again and be finding a whole new set of things.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's do the last 6 verses, because we got like 11 minutes left. This is going really quick. We got this. Mac, I think you're the last person that has not yet read.
Great. I'm going to be boring and read out of the NRSV UE.
Oh, let's go. Updated editions, y'all.
There you go. Let's Because whenever I type in NRSV, it already automatically comes up with the UE. So I'm like, all right, it works.
Got
It's
it.
forcing me to update.
Yep.
All right, 35. Jesus heard that they had driven him out, and when he found him, he said, "Do you believe in the Son of Man?" The man answered, "And who is he, sir? Tell me, so that I may believe in him." Jesus said to him, "You have seen him, and the one speaking with you is he." He said, "Lord, I believe," and he worshipped him. Jesus said, "I came into this world for judgment, so that those who do not see may see, and those who do see may become blind." Some of the Pharisees who were with him heard this and said to him, "Surely we are not blind, are we?" Jesus said to them, "If you were blind, you would not have sin. But now you say, 'We see,' your sin remains."
Ooh, some
This
spicy
last bit
stuff.
drives me nuts,
Was it?
which makes me feel better because it's scholarly consensus that it's a later insertion anyway. So in my head, I can be like, and they just tacked this on to the end of the story to be like, we need a tight little moral. There you go.
Yeah. Because of
perfect
that equivalence of like blindness and wickedness. Yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't do us any good anymore because we end up with, like, if we just stuck with perceiving language, I think would be great. If we don't draw a parallel between sight and perception, I think that we would be in a lot better shape. Because I do think that Jesus for sure goes to confuse the people who think that they know what's going on and confirm for people who are like, I don't know what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Just don't need the equivalents.
No, there are way more things being said in this passage that don't have that, we
The
don't
passage doesn't need it. We don't
No,
need it to get
yeah.
to something interesting.
Mm-mm.
Yeah, I agree. It could have stopped. But it's pretty cool because now I can see kind of what you say, that there is a progress of who Zach says that Jesus is, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I missed the third one. The third one is he says at the end of the last section we just read that he is sent from God. If this man were not from God, he could do nothing. So we've gone from man called Jesus to prophet, one sent from God, to now he needs help getting to the last step, though.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that that's really significant because a lot of times, like an easy trans example, like you can dress and look a certain way and you still don't know. Like I think of the non-binary experiences in particular, like just because I present in a certain way doesn't mean that you know my experience of gender.
Mm-hmm.
And this is the point where Jesus goes, like, did you get it? Do you believe in the Son of Man? Being like, all right, you got it, right? And he goes, who's that? Tell me so that I can believe. He's interested. He wants to know.
Yep.
Right.
And now Jesus has to choose. Like, first of all, I imagine a little bit of disappointment initially of like, when you're like, I really thought that you would have gotten this by now. Like, come on. It's like when you get manned on the phone. Like, come on.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
So I imagine there first being that disappointment of like, but then he goes, you know what? You've asked. You're clearly open to this. So I'll say, it's me. I am.
Mm-hmm.
And there's none of this like, oh no, it just looks like him nonsense from earlier. It's just like, I believe. Got it.
Got
Yep.
it.
Thank you.
Got it. That consistent narrative where people need some help seeing what is like evident in the topics of these stories. Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense.
How is in the translation you were reading from, Mac, in 36? How is that translated? In mine, it's "I want to believe in him," which I found really compelling. Like, who is he, sir? I want to believe in him.
I've got "tell me so that I may believe in him."
I don't know what the original is, but I like the idea that like he's expressing like, I really want to understand, like that. If you're talking about allyship, like
yeah,
that,
it sounds very similar to me.
Yeah,
it sounds very similar to me to like the "Lord, I believe, help my unbelief" part.
Mm-hmm.
Of just like, I want this, but I need help getting that last part.
Yep.
Yeah.
But the desire means a lot, like the sort of, I want to understand, I want to know you for who you are,
Yeah. Can they replace all the mentions of Lord with Sir? Because they do it in 36. They they translate kuri with sir, and at least in your NRSV and in my ESV, right? But then they use the same word again. He said, Lord, I believe. He doesn't say, sir, I believe. But it's the same.
It's a debate. Yeah, it's a debate. So it's definitely a choice on the part of the translators to just, because it's the same word, no matter what, Kyrie. It's the same word. So they're just deciding, well, he doesn't recognize him yet. So he's obviously not saying capital L Lord because he doesn't recognize him yet. So that must be more of like a sir, lowercase Lord. And then later, when he gets it, that's now different, capital L Lord. It's for sure it's just a translation choice on their part.
Got it.
Like KJV does. But technically it does have that sort of like more mundane translation too, of just being like, sir. Think like the old English my lord situation.
Please, sir, I want some more porridge, sir.
Yes. Yeah, same thing. Could be my lord.
Yep.
I just can't say that without it coming out in like a weird British accent.
Yes, exactly. Oof. I agree. Back to that like last passage where you have Jesus as being funny passages, and then you have Jesus as being sassy passages, and the last part here definitely fits within the sassy. Like, I need to read this every time I read this. I need to always read it 4 times because I'm like, okay. Clarity, Jesus. Talk with less words. I need to. Right?
Cannot.
You will not.
If you were blind, you would have no guilt. But now that you say we see, your guilt remains. And I'm like, is that like so he can say that and quickly run? And then the Pharisees like, is he dissing
Imagine
us?
like a puff of smoke.
He's dissing us, right? Yeah, exactly.
And then you like pan back. It's like when like after the credits, how they have like the tiny little scene at the end of the show, and you come back and they're all just like, "Wait, was that?"
Yeah.
That was. He was being nasty, right? Right?
Yeah. Now, the one thing I do like about this part is that it does say, "If you were blind, you would not have sin," which I think that that's nice because Jesus is sort of, going all the way back to the beginning. Of like, well, who sinned that this man is blind? But like, no, if they were blind, they wouldn't have any guilt. They wouldn't be sinning.
Mm-hmm.
But they're claiming vision, they're claiming perception. And in that is where their guilt lies.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, if we just switch it out with perception, it'd be better. Because you can see and not perceive.
Mm-hmm.
You would have no guilt, is what my ESV says. But yeah. Not have sin is the literal translation. That is.
Let me go see
see
which sin we've got here, because there's like 3 or 4 words that could be sin. Oh yeah, we got harmatia, which is the most basic sin word you got.
So having sin, that is an interesting form. But I mean, obviously, try to pour that into English, but it's like you like having sin is different than doing sin.
Yeah.
Everything.
Yeah. Which is, if we're going back to the beginning, like Jesus is saying here, it seems like there's nothing inherently sinful about this blindness.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. Thanks for that. That's pretty insightful, because then you have how can blindness be a cause of sin? You cannot have sin and then it sandwiches in the end.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is, I think, why this sort of got stuck onto the end here by whoever stuck it on there, as being like, oh, this is a lovely little bookend situation.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Let's finish this up. Yeah.
Yeah. And it works because, you get the moral of the story. Jesus leaves on a nice mic drop moment. The Pharisees are looking at each other being like, that was not very nice. And and the scene closes. Yeah.
Yep. Marvel Cinematic Universe continues with John 10, which I am the good shepherd is what the title says. So
he goes right on back to teaching and making his I am statements.
Good. It's one of those filler episodes, but
On to the
they're
next episode.
actually really good. Yeah.
So when will we be able to read your dissertation, Mac, on all of this?
Oh, I'm hoping it'll be done next May.
That's exciting.
Yes,
Yes.
I've got one
Well,
last chapter. So if you want to talk about John again, we can talk about John 18 and 19 because that one's going to be my most tricky chapter for sure.
Oof.
Behold the man.
Hmm.
Behold the man.
Some of them just like really lend themselves to good titles, like, and others do not. But some of them are just like really easy. Like that one's just asking for it.
Yes. Yes. You can see Amory posting and helping us a little bit in comments. Amory
Yes,
also is a doctoral student. Unlike me, though, Amory has been working on the program on a daemon for 5 years or so. So I think another person that is ready to be done. Yep.
It would be too.
Yeah. I just sped through it because I was like, let's go. Yep. Okay.
And I admire that.
my topic was much different.
Yeah, very interesting.
Seminary reform and intersectional theology, or how intersectional theology can help us lead to more inclusive churches and seminary reform.
Sounds good.
Hooray! So we are at 9 already. We talked for a good 55, 56 minutes. Thank you, Peter, and thank you, Mac, for being here. Peter, do you know when the next BSL is?
It is on June 19th, another Wednesday night.
Let's go. I am ready. I will be here. I think this is a good combo. I've been liking having you on, Mac. It's been a
Thanks.
pleasure seeing you as our I don't think you're a guest anymore. This is it. You and Peter are BSL. I'm a guest. You've done this more often than I have, Mac. That is awesome. Well, I always enjoy it, and everybody that is watching this live, thank you so much for helping us out with dating the book and with the grammar and stuff like that, and your questions and struggling with us. I hope to see y'all again on June 19th. And then if you're watching this afterwards, definitely go hit us up on Discord. We have a Discord where, if you're part of the trans or gender expansive community, we have an entire channel dedicated to this stuff where we can go talk about this. We got voice channels, so we can play video games while talking about the Bible. Listen, we have it all. TMC for the win, all I'm saying. So this is what was I going to say? This is it. So without further ado, thank you again for watching. Thanks, Peter and Mac, and I'll see you all next time.